Welcome back to our previews of SEC schedules for the coming football season. Blayne Gilmer, Blake Lovell with me as we preview the Arkansas Razorbacks, who have an interesting schedule. Only 4 true road games, Blake Lovell, but 2 that aren't, well, I wouldn't say neutral sites. One would be at a neutral site with Texas A&M, and then another game in Little Rock, which is pretty much an Arkansas home game, but not on campus. Anyway, an interesting schedule for the Razorbacks, who have an interesting season ahead.
You like to make your tiers of games and talk about how this is this portion and that portion. I assume you've got that for this one, but I've got my own tier for Arkansas about after game 3. Actually, maybe even include game 3 in there too with BYU making their move to the Big 12 this year. But my section from September the 23rd to the October the 14th is the hold on to your butts section of the Arkansas football schedule. And that is honestly what this season comes down to for me, because when you look at the way the schedule sets up, the first 3, I think, very winnable games, 1 in Little Rock, 2 in Fayetteville. Then you go beyond those 4 games from the 23rd of September to October 14th. Winnable games, I think, against Mississippi State, Florida, Auburn, Missouri. You got FIU as the other non-conference opponent in there. But at LSU, at Ole Miss, at Alabama versus Texas A&M, hold on to your butts. There you go. There's a T-shirt.
In that September 30th game, Texas A&M, Bobby Petrino is going to have a few plays, I think, dialed up to be able to attack the Arkansas defense. If we saw that last year with Missouri State coming into town. So my biggest takeaway from this, Chris, is right now you got to be looking at this already if you're an Arkansas fan and say, we don't have a Cincinnati on the schedule. We don't have Texas on the schedule as non-conference. We don't have a Bobby Petrino coach Missouri State. We don't have a Liberty team coached by Hugh Freeze. This non-conference schedule is quite the reprieve for Arkansas heading into 2023, just looking at it right off the bat.
All right, Blake, you made a crack about my tiers. We're going to start with the first tier of the Arkansas schedule.
Is it the break-in tier?
I'm going to call that is this touch football tier, because Western Carolina and Kent State, not exactly.
We're gonna get some Western Carolina fans in here. I'm gonna get them in this YouTube video.
Did either of you do your homework on Western Carolina?
I don't study the Catamounts very, very hard. I'll be honest with you.
All I can tell you is they're not in Athlon's preseason rankings of FCS teams, and I don't think they make the coaches poll. Don't know what that's not typically one of your powerhouse FCS teams. We do our little power rankings, our composite. Well, we've now added Phil Steele to that, in case you watched this earlier. Kent State is number 132 of the 133 FBS teams, only ahead of UMass. And
they did play Georgia really tough last year.
Don't forget, they did.
So there's always that.
But they lost their head coach and half their players. So there you go.
Their head coach left to become a coordinator, which is not usually a good sign that your program's on solid footing. Anyway, I can't make much more of that. Let's talk about the what did you call it, Blake?
The hold on to your butts.
The hold on to your butts, yes. Let's let you introduce the hold on to your butts, which it started by BYU, which is now, by the way, in the Big 12, for those of you keeping score at home. And otherwise, I will turn this over to you.
Well, look, here's the deal. I somewhat am joking about that, but if you take the first 2 games, say, all right, they're going to win those 2 games. And I know, to play up the hold on to your butt section, you kind of have to go to the end of the schedule, because this is where it becomes important, because when you do talk about the Mississippi State, Florida, Auburn, Missouri games, those are 4 winnable SEC games. Can Auburn win all? Can Arkansas win all 4 of those? Sure they could, right? 3 of those are at home, and one's at a Florida team that I think, as everyone will see, we're probably maybe a little bit lower on than most people heading into the season when we look at our power rankings for the summer. But that's where this 5-game stretch of BYU at LSU versus Texas A&M, which, by the way, that's in Arlington, as we know. So, and then you got at Ole Miss, then you got at Alabama. So Arkansas will play a home game on September the 16th. They won't play another home game until October the 21st against Mississippi State. So that to me is the portion of the schedule that tells us whether this Arkansas team is going to finish, I don't know, 5th, 6th, something in the West, or do they win 2 or 3 of these games in here? And then you look at all the winnable games elsewhere, and then all of a sudden we're talking about a team that's not just, an SEC West contender, if you will. Like they're right up there as like the sleeper team of the group when you really look at it, if they can win some of these games. So yeah, I mean, I can use that phrasing, but it really is kind of a stretch of games that could really define your season. And the reason I say that is you could lose all 5 of them, right? And I mean, you wouldn't be looking at it and being like, oh, well, it would be disappointing, but those are 5 good teams in there. So
They are, but to your point, if you do manage that, it's a pretty tasty schedule, as tasty as it can get in the SEC West over there towards the end. You're looking at a Missouri team who I will say I'm probably a lot higher on than most people because of the amount of starters they have coming back on the defensive side of the ball, and you can't discount that Missouri beat Arkansas last year, so you can't look past that too much. But I don't think you could ask for a better ending when you've got a Florida team that should be down this year and then 3 home games to end the season that way, coming all after a bye week there, Blake. So you're going to get recharged for that stretch run at the end and have going into the bye week what is likely going to be a Mississippi State team that is struggling to find their way in year one under Zach Arnett, switching from the air raid and everything that was Mike Leach to a more pro style type of team. So I think that this latter half of this schedule looks absolutely terrific for Arkansas, but it is a gauntlet there in those, weeks 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 right there, Chris.
Yeah, and that brings us to the last part of the schedule. The bye week is in between the hold on to your butt portion and the let's get bowl eligible portion, which leads off on October. Actually, the bye week is after the start of that. Mississippi State on October 21st. Then the bye week. Then at Florida, Auburn, FIU, and then Missouri. So the Razorbacks in with 3 straight home games with a Mississippi State home game to start that stretch off. So that's 4 games and 5 also at home. There's not an unwinnable game in this bunch. The FIU game next to last week of the season is kind of is this touch football part 2. FIU is ranked 127 in the power rankings we assembled here. So yeah, that's where it gets very interesting, guys.
yeah, no, I mean it does for sure because I mean, look, it's when Arkansas went 9-4 in 2021, they went 7-6 last year. Now you kind of just look at the way we've broke down the schedule here, right? Like you're looking at saying, okay, and by the way, guys, we're going to do our game by game predictions for every team in the SEC. We'll do those next month probably. But like when you look at the schedule, that is where these 5 games that are left, the Mississippi State, at Florida, Auburn, FIU, Missouri, right? It kind of flips a little bit what we said earlier. Arkansas is going to play a home game on September 16th, won't play another one until October 21st. Well, from October 21st to November 24th, they're only going to leave the state once, and that's to go to Gainesville to play a Florida team that we all seem to think is probably rebuilding. So, yeah, I mean, you could, like Blayne said earlier, you couldn't ask, I think, for a better setup for a schedule right now. The one that I think is interesting, and you guys probably know where I'm going with this, is the Auburn game because we've talked about it kind of in the other schedule previews we've done when we looked at Auburn on other teams' schedules. It's just kind of you'd love to probably get Auburn earlier in the season than you would later in the season, I would think, just based on now you've got a team that's probably a lot more familiar with what they're doing under Hugh Freeze now by the time November gets here versus maybe the team in September. And so that becomes a more interesting one. And like Blayne said earlier, too, I mean, even Missouri, right? I think Blayne may be higher on Missouri than me and Chris, but I am still pretty high on them. And I think that's a team that, as you said, they beat them last year. And so none of these are gimmies. We always say that. Everybody kind of knows that by now in the SEC. We're not going to say any of these games are just, hey, there's you're going to win that or you're going to win that. You don't know, but no matter where the game's played at. But it's just, that's why I think it's so interesting to see the way the schedule has unfolded, to have those 5 games, the gauntlet portion of the schedule, just to see kind of where Arkansas is at, because that'll probably tell us exactly what they can do in the final 5 games based on how they perform, in those 5 games from, like we said, the 16th to the 20th or through the 14th, that Alabama game in October.
For argument's sake, let's just say that right off the bat, KJ Jefferson, Dan Enos, Rocket Sanders, that whole offense with experienced offensive linemen like Bo Limmer, people like that. Let's say it just gets rolling and gets red hot, and they come into that Auburn game with 1, maybe 2 losses on the entire year. DWR will be rocking when it comes to that time of the year, because if you're there with 1 or 2 losses to depend on to the right teams, I think this is a year, Chris, where you're going to see a lot of parity in the SEC West, and I think it's up for grabs. So you could see a 1 or 2 loss team be right there in the thick of it in the last couple of weeks of the season. So I think that would be a big point to what Blake was saying. It doesn't always matter exactly where these games are played, but when it comes to that, if Arkansas is right in the thick of it down there towards the last 3 games, I think you're going to see DWR jumping similar to what it was when Texas visited a couple of years ago, and it's going to be a big advantage for the Razorbacks.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. You throw teams 4 to 12 in the SEC somewhere along that range in a hat. Just pick them at random, match them up. It stands to be a good matchup any given week, especially if the home team's always going to have a little bit of an edge. But there's a lot of parity in this league this year, I think, after the first few teams. And guys, let's hope if Arkansas goes bowling, let's just hope it's half the game that the Liberty Bowl was a year ago. You guys remember that one?
Yeah.
That was the Kansas game, correct?
Yes.
I think we were actually trying to do like a live stream or a show or something during that night, and we were like looking over our shoulders because it was just going nuts. It was going through that game. So just a crazy back and forth. But listen, I think one thing you're going to get out of this Arkansas team, and with this schedule specifically, as we're talking about the schedule preview, is excitement, because there's going to be those matchups. Like, you're going to have the new defensive coordinator and defensive style of Travis Williams versus how can he play chess against Bobby Petrino and Texas A&M's, remade offense. And of course, Ole Miss and Arkansas have put up points against one another. Is this the year that Arkansas is able to go to Bryant Denny and exercise some demons over there? So there's a lot of intriguing matchups, and I'm excited to see them.
Here's an interesting one, Chris. We talk about the way Arkansas' schedule is. They play at Ole Miss, at LSU, at Alabama. Like, that's kind of the rotation, right? Because they'll flip at each. So if you go back to 2021, we just talked about it, they go 9-4 that season. The scores from those 3 games, which I think we could say, hey, those could be the 3 defining games this season for them if they were to pull off a win. In 1 or 2 of those, perhaps. I look back at that, I'm like, at Ole Miss, this was the 2021 season, 52-51. That game was nuts. Now I remember it. It was just a nuts game. At LSU, they won in overtime, 16-13. And then they lost at Alabama by a touchdown, 42-35 in that one. So, hey, the last time they had this trio on the road a couple of years ago, as we know, that was kind of the season we thought, Arkansas really had turned things around after, where they go, I think 3-something in Sam Pittman's first year, 3-7. So, yeah, so just think about that. Those are very important games, but as we know too, the one I think we always circle with Arkansas, and you look back on it, because last year was that kind of year. You look back and say, that Texas A&M game, man, there are just it can be some wild results in that game, and that's another one that should be a lot of fun, obviously for us too, just to look at what is going to happen with Texas A&M this season after a disappointing year a year ago. So.
How many neck braces make their way into Jerry's world? How many? Over, under. How many neck braces?
We're gonna have
we
to.
Talk 1,000.
That's got to be in the dozens somewhere, don't you think?
I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be a fun time. It's gonna be a fun week of content here on Southeastern 14. I can tell you that because I'm going to be heavily involved in it, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with it.
It's not fun. Driving through Kansas. Have you guys ever done that?
There's a lot of things I could have went with there, but
don't.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Speaking of Kansas, didn't we do an Arkansas-Kansas basketball video at some point a few months ago?
we
I
may
remember
have.
something about that. I think I remember something about that game. There you go,
Perhaps.
Arkansas fans. Must bus rolling right along.
All right. Well, we're going to roll right along with our power rankings. We're going to do the East and the West. We're going to preview. If you haven't seen your team previewed from the schedule perspective yet, just wait. That's coming soon. Best way to get all that stuff, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics in any case. For Blayne Gilmer and Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.